When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to separation. On July 4th, 1776, these words, drafted by a Virginian hand gifted with great eloquence, far more blessed than my crippled one, were carefully considered by the 56 colonists from an empire who came to a new world seeking something that they could not find or imagine possible in an old world. They came as Puritans and pilgrims, not just in a religious sense, as in a secular one, perhaps naive and unrehearsed in the wily ways of a wanton world. And like the missionaries of James Michener's Hawaii, they came to do good and did well. They were neither whining children, punks, nor raving madmen. Although certainly there were some loyalist Tories even living under a colonial and oppressive rule amongst them who may have called them so, perhaps even granting official sanction in the press by guardians of that fourth estate. No, having endured in patient sufferance for a considerable term of years, these were not rash nor impulsive men, although some loyalist Tories, unaffected in their own interests by thoughts of oppression or tyranny, and comfortable that the legal framework is operating just fine, as a recent congressional candidate in this district who also denied that the electoral system was biased or rigged, even in the face of incontrovertible evidence acknowledged by political scientists that there is, at the least, an advantage in incumbency and wealth, may deny the sheer weight of empirical evidence of science, as well as anecdotal indicators derived from situational awareness and unbiased observation. And they were not anarchists, recognizing even in this solemn document that they signed that governments are instituted among men, but including a simple caveat that those bodies derive their just powers from the consent of the government. And accordingly, they concluded with no lack of insight, as mental health clinicians use that term, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to effect their safety and happiness. And today, the debtor is informed by an audience of over 46,000 persons on Facebook that are talking about his political campaign videos, alone, nigh a month after an electoral contest in which he did not even appear on the ballot. Over 35,000 persons on that same social medium who are talking about his run for U.S. Congress, even though he was never invited to speak before a candidate forum. And with more people talking about him on Facebook than former vice presidential nominee Senator Tim Kaine, in addition to a Twitter audience that daily engages over 5,000 users, many people in observance of these events and pleadings posted there are not happy with what is going on here. A sleeping Leviathan has, by all appearances, been awoken by incomprehensible mess, and social media posts too long didn't read. TLDR. And as Victor Hugo reminded us about the power of an idea whose time has come, being resistant even against the march of armies, our childhood fables remind us that you cannot put a genie back in a bottle without a fight. You can't kick over a hornet's nest without being stung. You can't open Pandora's box and not expect escape from calamity. And you can't get them back on the farm once they have seen the city life. Foes with some considerable woe may extinguish one spark, but once Elsie kicked over that lantern in a barn of combustibles, a raging conflagration was as much a mathematical certainty as the words of the captain aboard James Cameron's HMS Titanic in dispatch of the myth of an unsinkable ship, too big to fail, to the dear sweet rose-colored girl who herself considered suicide. She is made of iron, and I assure you that she will sink. But if you are happy and you know it, clap your hands. If you are happy and you know it, stomp your feet. Well, the debtor in this matter before this honorable court is a foot-stomping Baptist, filled with and sanctified by a Holy Spirit. But happy is not the cause for his behavior here, and this submission in pleading, as much as in its pursuit, not just for him and or for his friends and family, neither nor for those who have pledged great trust in him, but for a nation hopefully grateful that he called once home, to whom a faith and promise has not been kept. And that is the house, hearth, and home that he seeks to preserve in blessed union, peace, and tranquility, not just a property secured by a uniform commercial code, Article 9, security interest of a creditor acting in bad faith to effect a politically oppressive end. And so, to be or not to be, that is the question before this honorable court and its sworn officers, who took a solemn oath to protect, preserve, and perpetuate that sacred liberty and union, one and inseparable, now and forever, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty, truth, and justice for all. And in long yet patient endurance of suffering against the thousand natural, albeit now officially described as atypical and ever interesting events, termed now oft as anomaly shocks, that his flesh has given air to. And so, in a manner described as kamikaze by one local reporter, he takes arms against that sea of trouble in hopes that he might, by opposing, end them. There is the one. Truly, conscience does not make cowards of us all, particularly not true patriots, and not those who are captive to it, and its mandate for action, and its imperative not to remain silent in the face of wrong and true evil. Damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead, and with God's blessing and favor, even the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. If God is for us, who can be against? Of whom then shall debtor be afraid? In the most recent joinder of a party in interest to this action, seeking relief from a statutorily prescribed automatic stay by entry of appearance of yet another attorney at law, the second from that same law firm, to represent that creditor party in interest since the debtor's tangible property in real estate was threatened by foreclosure sale, initiated by that party not long after the celebration of Independence Day for this once great nation that one and other deplorables seek to make great again, seeks to convince this noble court and its sworn officers that it is an aggrieved victim, innocent, and deserving of exemption from the natural order of these proceedings in bankruptcy protection. It argues that these proceedings will prevent it from being made whole again, as is the aim and goal of justice for those suffering injuries and for whom there is an available legal remedy. It is a ritual recitation and child's memorized prayer, giving rise to boilerplate template forms that can even be found on the internet. Cut and paste and change the names and dates to fit your circumstance in this ceremonious dance of right. But if this honorable court is still sympathetic and amenable to a rule of law contemplated by our founding fathers when they sat in Philadelphia, that city of brotherly love, the place where one political party was connected to the other, attendant acts of tyranny to this immediate action, joined in convention in our summer land. The debtor prefers, for deliberate consideration, a doctrine of man derived from a common law tradition with origins in an old world land of Magna Carta. In the Latin, man provides a root in etymology for not a whole person, nor 3/5 of one, as found in compromise 2 centuries ago on these golden shores, where the debtor lifts his lamp in search of an honest man. Like a certain Greek of old and ancient time, where codes were written oft in stone to endure the winds and rains of time and erosion, but which now some more liberal parties, crying the liberal spirit of a living document that cannot find life in a child in the womb. In Latin, man provides that etymological root for our present vocabulary of mandatory, mandamus, and manipulation, and speaks not necessarily of Adam Smith's invisible hand, nor the hand of God, but simply more like Reverend Jesse Jackson's nimble limb extensions from his torso that once picked cotton, but which aspired to pick presidents. And in our illustrious jurisprudence, jurists long ago imagined a defense in action for parties brought into court, hopefully with due notice of action so that they might anticipate the possibility of contest and so prepare with due diligence the clean hands doctrine. And under this rule, according to definitions published on uslegal.com, the clean hands doctrine is a rule of law that someone bringing a lawsuit or motion and asking the court for equitable relief must be innocent of wrongdoing or unfair conduct relating to the subject matter of his or her claim. Clean hands. Clean hands. If you are happy and you know it, clap your hands. On November 28th, 2016, one court officer, Lynette Kendrick, the former acting trustee, by pleading papers filed with this honorable court, declared her resignation from this matter, noting that after appropriate inquiry into the affairs of the debtor, she has determined that circumstances exist which render her not a disinterested party in this case, and which possibly constitute a conflict of interest. It is, to date, the most honest, albeit carefully crafted statement to avoid subsequent liability, which the debtor has received in over a year and a half from an official source during his anticipation, promotion, and perseverance in a bitterly waged political contest. And these words, on somber reflection of antecedent events on that same day, when an emissary of Senator Tim Kaine was exposed on social media by the debtor for his untoward actions and intercession in the political candidacy of the debtor, continuing a long and prolific stream of press releases, statements, and postings alleging fraudulent conduct to affect and manipulate the voting results in Virginia's 8th Congressional District sounds so much in echo like those holy and inspired words about a character implicated in prosecution of a historical Jesus in the book of Matthew, chapter 27, and at the 24th verse. When Pilate saw that he could prevail nothing, but that rather a tumult was made, he took water and washed his hands before the multitude, saying, I am innocent of the blood of this just person. See ye to it. But here is not the time or place to judge the motivations or actions of the resigned trustee as she scurries off in retreat, so much as to note the date of this filing with the court and the attendant certificate of service, placing in the post via first-class mail a copy of that pleading and served to the debtor. The pleading was placed in the stream of first-class postal delivery on November 28, 2016, from a U.S. post office in Alexandria, Virginia, and was delivered and opened by the debtor at his present residence in Arlington, Virginia on December 1st, 2016. As in the rise of a savior from a tomb, it took just 3 days. It is neither of dispositive value, even if of probative one, that is the first and only pleading received by debtor from that same officer of the court since the present action was commenced, despite the scheduling and subsequent rescheduling of the mandatory Section 341 meeting of creditors, now to convene on the same date of the hearing on the matters brought by security interest lien holders to gain relief from the automatic stay. But what is of note and consequence here is that NationStar, by and through its retained local counsel, filed and presumptively certified delivery of service for their present motion on November 15th, 2016. 13 days in may be delivered, and that parcel post has yet to be received by the debtor, nor has the issuing attorney returned his call. As Billy D. Williams asks to Diana Ross when they meet in Lady Sings the Blues, by coincident fact, the same favorite line he presented to a shocked Florence the maid, Marla Gibbs, on the Jeffersons when they met. What do you want? My arm to fall off. Now, under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 5A1, the rules that govern proceedings brought before civil courts in our federal system of courts, 1. In general, unless these rules provide otherwise, each of the following papers must be served on every party. A, an order stating that service is required. B, a pleading filed after the original complaint unless the court orders otherwise under Rule 5C because there are numerous defendants. C, a discovery paper required to be served on a party unless the court orders otherwise. D, a written motion except one that may be heard ex parte. And E, a written notice, appearance, demand, or offer of judgment, or any similar paper. And as we judge the cleanliness of the hands of the most recently joined party in action, NationStar, we note in statutory construction that the authors and ratifiers of this guiding bright line rule made service mandatory and not precatory. Absent exemption by an established, enumerated, and expressed reason, no party can simply just opt out of this obligation to the court and the parties to it in action. It is, in effect, a statute of limitation, and it dictates clearly that no man is above the law, and any man or woman who transgresses this golden rule should be subject to its due consequence and repercussion, hell, fire, and damnation. At least if we are still under a rule of law, and if it is not just but a fiction or fairy tale, a delusion of the debtor as so determined by a court of public opinion for which his political adversaries have served as judge, jury, and executioner. But if you are happy and you know it, clap your hands. Moreover, under that same guiding and dictating Rule 5, a party to an action has several means available to effectuate service to the other interested parties in action, to include A, handing it to the person, B, leaving it, I, at the person's office with a clerk or other person in charge, or if no one is in charge, in a conspicuous place in the office, or double I, if the person has no office or the office is closed, at the person's dwelling or usual place of abode with someone of suitable age and discretion who resides there. C, mailing it to the person's last known address, in which event service is complete upon mailing. D, leaving it with the court clerk if the person has no address. E, sending it by electronic means if the person consented in writing, in which event service is complete upon transmission, but is not effective if the serving party learns that it did not reach the person to be served. Or F, delivering it by any other means that the person consented to in writing, in which event service is complete when the person making service delivers it to the agency designated to make delivery. Furthermore, if a local rule so authorizes, a party may use the court's transmission facility to make service under Rule 5B2E. But in the present instance, not even one of these virtually multitudinous options were attempted, exhausted, or completed. And the only way that the debtor discovered that there was an action filed by that party nation star was when he happened to visit the court and specifically requested a copy of the updated docket for another purpose. Accidents of law. This is not a success story. As the former commander of the 902nd Military Intelligence Group at Fort Meade, Maryland, often said before he launched into his berating of subordinate commanders charged with responsibility for counterintelligence activities conducted in the continental United States when they failed to meet his standards or expectations of performance. But if you are happy and you know it, clap your hands. As a debtor in this proceedings, he has no electronic means of filing nor receiving notification about matters affecting his case, and by consequence relies on the delivery of mail or one of the other multiple and permissible ways that others in the present action might communicate to him matters in which he has a truly vested interest and concern. And reliance forms the basis of another jurisprudential doctrine in equity to cure iniquity through estoppel. It is a legal term of art with which every first-year law student becomes familiar and self-enamored with the opportunity to astound and amaze his or her friends with his or her expanded vocabulary to sound learned and erudite. And it is certainly a term that an associate employed by a law firm and who once served on a law review should know, at least from its appearance in some form on the bar examination. And therefore, or ergo, again to call upon the sanctimonious pretentiousness of Latin scholarship. Since ignorance of the law is no excuse for an attorney duly licensed and trained claiming I didn't know the gun was loaded or words to that effect should work to bar that party from legal remedy, even to amend that which he or she should have known, to use a now popularized phrase, at the time. The FBI Director James Comey, in connection with that cited phrase, described those actions as gross negligence. Moreover, as we gather at this water cooler of justice and reach for that sanitized solution, bubbly lather treated with lanolin, or just a floating bar of ivory soap, Rule 5 reminds us of another sacred and solemn duty in public service. Any paper after the complaint that is required to be served, together with a certificate of service, must be filed within a reasonable time after service. And at some point, very long before the present date, which the debtor will leave to the court's discretion to determine with exactitude, but on, before, or shortly after November 15, 2016, a reasonable time became ancient history, as far removed from the present time as the figures in literature and Greeks and Romans referenced herein. And as a local preacher on Advent Sunday alluded, today we are closer to the end times of an apostle named Paul, or even the days of Revelation, some say imagined by a prophet named John, as he sat in exile and wrote inspired words on an isle called Patmos, that nation star and its retained council are to a reasonable time to effectuate service of the required papers. And this act presents not just a mere violation of a local court rule numbered 5, but the whole notion of due process articulated in the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution of these United States, and the process that is due to each party brought into these tribunals of justice that may affect irreparably those self-evident truths in right of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So the debtor asks yet again, are you happy? Well, if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. But if, in accordance with the rule numbered in ordinal denomination as 5, the attorney for Nation Star, like the resigned acting trustee, and like the other parties named in interest who file papers in this action long delayed in receipt by the debtor to provide him, a pro se litigant, untrained and unskilled in the complexities of law, the skills of legal reasoning, and the arts of persuasion and legal argument, with a process that was due, claim in their collective defense that they did all they could, but the post was just not reliable, even to the standards of a Pony Express, far from a federal one. It is indeed an uncanny coincidence, at the least, but more indicative of a confirmation that someone truly lied. And the deeper and remaining question to be considered beyond the four corners of this document and beyond the four walls of this honorable court is whether it is just a lie in the due process or a lie about the due process, especially when conjoined with other allegations and facts brought forth in prior pleadings incorporated by reference. The poet and bard, reminding us of something rotten in Denmark in ages past, wrote in memorable words about some clean hands for his examination, and words about which we should be reminded today. What hands are here? Ha! They pluck out mine eyes. Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand? No, this my hand will rather the multitudinous seas in Cardim, making the green one red. Or maybe, like those cherished traditions, that is just a work of fiction and fairy tale that the debtor once read. But if not just a dream ethereal in this Christmas holiday season, if we are not like Charles Dickens' Ebenezer Scrooge, being visited in a wintry night, in a winter of our own fear of missing out, content in a social medium with the dandelions of summer long dead under the snow, by three spirits of past, present, and future, if we cannot dismiss and quickly rebuff the appearance of the debtor and his pleadings as an undigested bit of beef, a blot of mustard, a crumb of cheese, a fragment of underdone potato, as we rule on these matters before this honorable court in execution of its sworn duties, these words of ghost long dead, if not even in memory, dictate our resolve. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that government long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. And as we are reminded in literary fiction by a certain Robert Louis Stevenson of words that give all pirates in acts of piracy due pause, as they set sail and adrift upon the open seas of Disney's Caribbean, as Long John Silver used to say, dead men tell no tale. And then with sudden swiftness, that seafaring vessel in a Disney-inspired world finds rapid descent upon breach and break of an ominous fall. But if you are happy and you know it, clap your hands. Still, as the child advocate Marian Edelman Wright this past summer reminded an African-American congregation across the Potomac in a historic church that had gathered to hear a gleeful concert from the Morehouse University students who were joined by the D.C. Boys Choir. When you are elected, remember that it is all about the children. And as this court sits in elected deliberation, it should be mindful of the inquiring words that every night began the newscast for Metro Media News of WNEW, today the Fox network in Manhattan long ago. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are? Many today indeed are sitting in law school classes in numbers so great that they exceed the numbers of available jobs, but they keep coming, burning midnight oil, engaging in study groups, briefing cases, preparing outlines, and enduring in great hope and expectation of a fulfillment of an American dream. Some, dare say, probably most, come to these academic spires inspired by that spirit that Alexis de Tocqueville witnessed on his journey across the pond. Not so poor as not to cast a glance of hope and envy upon the enjoyments of the rich. And for those, the equation for success of Gordon Gekko of fame and Oliver Stone's Wall Street finds a resonating resilience. Give them to me poor and hungry. They come not to do good, but well. But still, A scarce few do not arrive as prospectors looking for gold and dim their hills, or as desperate gamblers deplaning in McCarran International Airport in Las Vegas, convinced that their few coins aplenty will not be added to the billions of dollar tally that a welcoming sign at that point of debarkation announces unashamedly that it takes. And they are those blessed little children of which a Christian Savior speaks in beatitude. They are those true believers with noble spirit and hope who actually want the jobs of public defender and other professional prospects that undermine the business sense of the mounds of debt they assume in continuing legal education. So on deciding these matters, this honorable court must think about those children and wretched of the earth. If they are not already disillusioned by deference doctrines and frustrating outcomes that seem at times to perpetuate a status quo, sanction wrongs, and thwart the ends of justice and truth in its philosophical sense, in a short term that frustrates even those readers of Tolstoy's War and Peace, armed with the strengthening words and perseverance of General Mikhail Kutuzov, patience and time. This court must ask, after deciding this case, like parents considering divorce or separation of a family unit, what do we tell the children? What do we tell these children who break during this time from their tedious and laborious studies and cramming for comprehensive examinations that determine the trajectory of their fate and destiny to, in a liberal spirit, join cheerful carolers in the streets, spreading glad tidings, to commune with houses of faith, rationing charity and welcome gifts in an expression of a type of love, or who join those festive celebrations of minstrels, some adorned in kente cloth, of our little brown brothers in their soulful praise. What do we tell the children here? And if this court can fashion from those magical words that we learn in law school, the open doors of justice, a gentle and sweet mixture served in a tall glass with a pink paper umbrella and chilled with the ice of abracadabra, open sesame, and a la peanut butter sandwiches, a debtor who came to do well will have produced the greatest illusion of all, to do no harm, but actual good. Or perhaps this court has a greater power to perform true magic and alchemy. And in conclusion, as this court reflects upon the proper incantations to recite in homage and obeisance to our profaned idols, oft in vainglorious praise, heed they be not unmindful of the future, non-incautus futuri. Take good care in goodwill and tidings in a holiday season not to cast misspells, for the wrong turn of phrase, inflection, or misplaced accent might pervert the illusion beyond their skilled and determined intent. May not the blessed holy virgins of our cherished ladies be disgraced, nor the virgin birth of their bosom find abortion in their womb. Woe to them who are at ease in Zion, lest by conjuring grand illusion they transform one lady of our liberty in a lake copper green in presentment to one crimson red in anger, reproach, and shame, nor perform wonders and spectacles to the senses that her female and saintly blinded cousin might vanish from the reflection of her own image in a looking glass forever. Poof. But if you are still yet happy and you know it, please continue to clap your hands. Therefore, the debtor leave to your informed mind and good conscience the discretion to act in accordance with what you have heard here, And he trusts not just in your mercy and kindness, but in this moment now more than ever as a people in God we trust. And we find great comfort that this is not a political candidate forum, abandon all oaths ye who enter here, but rather a judicial and official one where all parties in interest and its administrators, officers, and justices are under oath in service for terms of good behavior. God bless you. God bless this court. And God bless these United States. So help me God. Into thy hands I commit my spirit. But in the end, not my will, but thy will be done. Wherefore, the debtor moves for the court to deny these requests for relief from automatic stay as to the above described property pursuant to 11 United States Code Section 362, as their request is an attempt to abuse the purposes and applications of state law and in perversion of the aims of justice. By my crippled hand this day, that may too live in infamy, we pledge our lives, our fortune, and our sacred honor. Michael David Webb, debtor. Pro.